And we are in a Zoom meeting. So we encourage everyone, if you have questions, to put those into the chat. We will monitor the chat for questions. We would like to keep documentation of the questions that are asked by our community. So please do post those there, and we will respond. If needed, you may unmute to follow up or ask for more information when we answer those questions, but please do stay muted, both video and audio, during tonight's meeting, and post those questions to the chat. Thank you. With us tonight, we have Mr. Andrew Cantwell, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Administrative Services. Also with us tonight is Ms. Sharon Caseo, Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services. And also with us tonight is Dr. Peter Knappich, Director of Elementary Education. So I want to appreciate them for joining us tonight. We will again be presenting on the topic of LCFF overview and our budget overview for supplemental. So with that said, I'll get us started with tonight's presentation, unless there's any other questions or concerns from anyone else on the panel. Okay. So just quickly, our LCFF background, which is the funding revenues that we receive and the way that the state funds our schools, is a local control funding formula. There's base funding that's associated with daily attendance from our students and enrollments in the grades that you can see there. In addition to that base funding, we also receive supplemental funding as part of the LCFF formula. That supplemental funding is generated by students who meet certain targeted categories, and those categories are English language learners, students in foster care, students who are homeless, and students who are socially economically disadvantaged. We get an additional 20% of that funding formula for those students, and that's where our supplemental budget comes from. In addition to that, the state also provides concentration funding for schools or districts that have an unduplicated pupil count exceeding 55%, and Burbank does not qualify for that. We do not have enough students in those identified categories to reach that 55 or plus threshold. So that's just general background of how our schools are funded. Along with that, 8 state priorities that drive the LCAP. And so these are priorities set by the state that we do our best and drive some of the decision making behind how we spend our LCAP funds and how we spend that supplemental budget. So you can see those there. And those are checked also by LACO, our local county, as far as the requirements to address those 8 priorities. Along with the state priorities, we have our local priorities set by our school board, and these are our LCAP goals, also our BUSD goals, and they basically address our student needs in 4 main categories. The first being college and career and instructional support. The second being physical, emotional, mental, and the whole child and supporting students at our schools. The third is focused on staffing, recruitment, and retainment of quality employees. And then the fourth is about our facilities and making sure that our classrooms are conducive to the needs of our instructional programs. So if you think of our LCAP, those 4 main goals and our district goals is how we fund and to tackle our different objectives and action items to support students, and specifically the students who meet these categories that were identified by the funding. So speaking of which, I see a question: what is the unduplicated pupil mean? What unduplicated means is that these students do not count more than once. So if a student is an English language learner and also homeless, we only count that student one time. We can't count them under multiple categories. So that's where the term unduplicated comes from. But we use it, and the state uses it, to identify students who meet any of these categories. So unless I missed anything, or if Dr. Knappich and Ms. Caseo have been working with the LCAP longer than I have, if they have anything to share about the LCAP process before we get started. Otherwise, I can turn it over to Mr. Cantwell to talk about our district budget and LCFF funds. Okay.
I think you covered it well.
Mr. Cantwell.
Thank you, Robin, and good evening to everyone. It is a pleasure to be joining you this evening. My name is Andy Cantwell. Again, I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Administrative Services, which means among other responsibilities, I oversee the fiscal department. I have a tendency to talk rather fast, especially when I get excited talking about school finance. And so I'm going to intentionally slow myself down for our translators and to ensure full inclusion of our participants. So please forgive me if at times I build in some pauses. So to make sure that we understand the big picture of education funding, we start with this slide that helps you see the funding sources that Burbank Unified receives. We receive some funding from the federal level. However, it's never as much as we think. You can see in this budget, I'm going to draw your attention to the right pie, the right circle. That was our budget that we presented to the board in December. We are anticipating receipt of only $14 million from the feds this fiscal year. Our fiscal year runs the same as our school year, from July 1 through June 30. We receive the bulk of our funding from LCFF. Again, the topic of tonight's discussion, you can see at this revision in December, over $160 million of revenue coming to the district through LCFF. In total, our budget this year for revenue is $226 million. To take one tangent or one side step on this discussion, I want to make sure you understand the way that we budget and the way that we revise our budgets. So the school district is responsible for adopting a budget each June. Again, we adopt that only a matter of days before the fiscal year begins. And that's what you see in the middle pie, is the budget at adoption in June of 2022. However, throughout the year, we're monitoring our budget very closely. We're looking at actuals, we're looking at new projections for things like enrollment, for staffing, for utility cost, and we're making updates. And so we bring those updates to the board at 2 specified times. The first is in December. The second is in March. And so those are the main checkpoints that the community has to see the update to the budget. And then we begin that cycle all over again, building our budget for the following year in the spring, ultimately being approved in June. And so again, tonight's discussion is going to focus on the budget as it looks in December of 2022. Robin, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So many of you perhaps have heard, if you've joined us in the past or have tuned into board meetings, that we received significant funding related to COVID and our response to COVID. Nearly $50 million of funds came to the district. However, we've nearly spent that down entirely. And we do not anticipate any further one-time funding for COVID purposes moving forward. There's a lot of detail on this slide that I'm not going to go into. Again, the takeaway is that the COVID funding has ended, and we're just spending the final funds that remain from that source. Expenditures. We are operating a budget this year with $224 million in expenditures. The key understanding here to convey is, again, looking at that right pie. About 80% of our cost in the school district are people cost. You can see that identified in classified salaries, certificated salaries, and employee benefits. To make sure that everyone on the Zoom understands the distinction, certificated salaries are those connected to individuals who require a credential for their position. Think mainly teachers, principals, counselors, other similar positions. Classified salaries are those positions in the school district that do not require a credential. Most commonly support staff, custodial, grounds and maintenance, your business office, your human resources departments, a lot of the operations of the school district. And so when you look at those categories and also combine some of the services and other expenditures, which include some personnel cost there that we hire a third party to help us with. Those would be primarily special education costs to help us staff hard to fill positions. Combining those categories, we're at about 80%, approximately 80% of, I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. Was there a question?
No, we just had a participant come off mute. You're good now.
Okay. So combining those categories, again, about 80% of our budget is personnel cost. The budget
This is Peter.
I'm sorry, Peter?
This is Peter. If I could just interject that 80% is common across districts in the state of California. That most districts have about 85% of their expenditures in salaries and benefits.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the industry norm, the statewide average is between 78 and 85%. The norm being in those low 80s. And so we actually are slightly below state average. However, it's a little bit skewed right now because so much of our funding coming from one-time sources, we're coming in for the purpose of non-personnel cost. Or they were budgeted initially to non-personnel budget categories, and that will be changed as we revise our budget. So the understanding here that I'd also highlight is if you look at the unaudited actuals, that's just a way of saying our budget from last year. We are up about $20 million in expenses projected for this present year. That's a combination of salary increases that our staff received in the spring, as well as a variety of staffing and non-personnel related priorities for 2 one-time new funding sources, our Learning Recovery Block Grant, and an Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Block Grant. Those are 2 brand new funding sources that we received this year. They're one-time monies, meaning that we will not receive them again. They can be spent over multiple years. And in total, they were about $21 million of funds coming in for that purpose. Robin, let's go to the next one. So when we talk about district expenditures, and particularly things which increase each year, a major one that we focus on is the pension cost. For our teachers, the pension is called STIRS, and for our classified staff, it's PERS. So when you see that on this slide, that's what's referring to. The way to read this slide is to understand that for every dollar in salary that a classified employee receives, the school district pays 25 cents on top of that dollar to go into their pension. For a teacher, for every dollar of salary they receive, the district spends an additional 19 cents to contribute to their pension. These costs have more than doubled over the past decade, and we anticipate further increases in these coming years. This is not controlled at a local level, it's decided by the state, but it's a significant increased cost and priority that the district must consider each year. Another budget priority that does take a significant amount of the budget is special education. This year, we're looking at a special education cost of about $27 million. You can see that that is increasing each year also. One thing that we have to look at is the cost of living adjustments, or CPI, the inflation index, and understand that it's all cost for the school district, just as for ourselves in our personal economies in our home. The school district is also being hit significantly by inflationary factors. Utility rates are increasing for us. The cost of non-personnel instructional materials, textbooks, inflation is a significant driver of cost for the school district this year, for increased cost.
Andy, I'm wondering if you can clarify just a little bit about revenue for special education, because people are often curious about, so how much revenue does the school district or a school district get for special education?
Thank you, Peter. That's a great prompt. Special education is funded at both the federal and the state level. We receive a set allocation based on a number of factors, including overall student enrollment and students on IEP. IEP stands for an individualized education plan. That's a student who's in special education will have one of those plans. However, we do not receive nearly enough funding to meet the financial cost of providing a free and appropriate public education for those kiddos. And so each year, in excess of the funding we receive specifically for special education, we must cover those costs through LCFF or other funding sources. So you saw a few slides ago that our budget has increased both from last year as well as from that which was adopted at budget adoption in June. The most significant driver of that change, as I said, is the one-time funding that came into the school district. The legislature and governor approved that budget at the very end of June. And so when we adopted the budget, it was not part of our adopted budget, but it was added in December. Beyond that, some of the basic changes that you see mid-year are tied to step and column increases for our staff. Our staff, both teachers and non-teaching faculty or non-teaching staff, are on a salary schedule where they do receive raises at intervals based on years of experience and education level. And so those are increases that have been added to the current year budget. Additionally, we have added a number of positions, new positions, including, as you can see here, for things like additional hourly support for transitional kindergarten aides, for teachers who are paid out of COVID funding, and a number of other personnel priorities. We have also some capital outlay that is for projects that are in excess of $5,000. Those are the larger facility improvements, and you can see that we have a number of projects that continue, including at Miller, Bret Harte, and Edison. So this is the perhaps most important slide that I'll present tonight, and this is the closest thing that we have to a balance sheet. When I create a budget and bring it to the board, we look at a 3-year interval. We look at the current year as well as the next 2 years to ensure that we remain fiscally solvent. And so what you're looking at here is our projection for not just the 22-23 current school year, but for the next 2 years. In the current year, if you look at that bold line, that's letting you know that we are anticipating a budget surplus or budget excess, meaning that we have more revenue coming into the district than expenditures. However, I want to caution that because that's significantly influenced by those one-time dollars. And so if you were to pull those funding sources out, we are operating at a deficit this year, also a structural deficit of about $2 million, which means that we are bringing in less revenue than we have expenditures. Next year, you can see that that continues. Again, looking at the bold line, the bold numbers in the second column, a $1.6 million deficit. And then in the 24-25 school year, that increases more significantly, an $8.5 million deficit. However, if you continue down the columns or down the rows, forgive me, you'll see that we are beginning with a reserve on hand, and that's why we're able to spend down, or we are able to spend more money than we are bringing in. We have a beginning fund balance this year of approximately $39 million. Again, that's a lot of those funds are restricted, so that's not available for any purpose that the board may deem a priority, but rather have limitations. But nonetheless, we do have that those funds available. Each year, those funds will be spent down, and you can see in the 24-25 school year, we spend down approximately $10 million from what we currently have. To draw your attention to the next significant line, the restricted one-time state and federal funding is approximately $20 million. And that's the funding I was just mentioning that has significant restrictions to it, that are a portion of the $29 million reserve that we're showing, or the ending fund balance that we're showing in that 24-25 school year. The state requires that we maintain a reserve for economic uncertainties. It's 3% of our overall budget, and you can see that we, of course, meet that requirement each year. However, again, we are anticipating spending down the reserve that we currently have. So I'll wrap up with this overview of just mentioning again that we do have some challenges with our budget. We continue to struggle to fill certain positions, as I know many employers, both public and private, are facing right now. We have incredibly committed and dedicated staff who we're seeking to improve compensation for. And so we anticipate that will be ongoing this upcoming spring as we work with our bargaining units, with our partners in the workforce to improve compensation. However, as I mentioned, we do have that structural deficit that we have to be mindful of, ensuring that we have sufficient revenue to meet our expenditures. We continue to work very closely with the board, with administration, and with our staff to ensure fiscal responsibility, fiscal solvency.
Thank you, Mr. Cantwell. We do have one question, and I thank the participant for your patience in responding to that. But there was a question about our DHH program and that it's one of the best in the Valley. We appreciate that comment. But it was a question about special funding for this program. And to the best of my knowledge, the funding would typically come out of special ed funds if those students qualify for additional services. But there are no supplemental or LCAP funds that are specific to the DHH program.
That's correct.
And then Kelly Dunkel asked a question for the cost of the SELPA as described in the February 3rd school board agenda. How is that $128,000 cost covered under the LCAP budget, the reserve, the general fund? Andy, is that something you can respond to?
Yeah, they're talking about an SLP assistant, a speech and language pathologist assistant. You know, I do not know the source right now off the top of my head. If I'm given 2 minutes, I can have an answer before we wrap up the meeting.
Thank you. And then before we transition to our supplemental funds, are there any other questions about the slides or information that Mr. Cantwell presented? Thanks, and we can always revisit if we need to. So just a reminder, so our supplemental LCAP budget, the drivers for that revenue are students that meet those unduplicated pupil categories. And so this is a chart that looks at the last 3 years, or excuse me, last 2 years, including this year, of the number of students who meet those requirements or categories that bring in these funds. Also a reminder that the funds that we receive, we have to focus those funds on these students. So you will see in our LCAP plan that the action items within are really focused on improving or increasing the services and support that these students receive. Based on that, on the information on the slide, you can see we've stabilized somewhat this year. So the past couple of years, we've been seeing a declining enrollment overall as a school district, and also a declining enrollment in our unduplicated pupil count. We've stabilized a little bit this year with both enrollment and our unduplicated pupil count, but we're cautious going forward to see if the trend of declining enrollment will continue or whether we will continue to stabilize. But again, this is where our funding comes from, and it's generated based off of these numbers. So this is our supplemental budget overview for our LCAP. And you can see it's a small slice of the overall funds that we receive as a district. Total LCFF funds are quite large compared to the amount of funds that we receive, but we receive, and this was our projected budget of about $10 million for supplemental. The next couple of slides are all focused on our first goal, our district goal. And if you remember from the previous slides, our goal 1 is really around college and career readiness and instruction in our classrooms. So you'll see that this list of items identified in our LCAP are items that support this goal. And we had an adopted budget that was approved in June of last year. And then again, just like Mr. Cantwell had stated, a first interim update that take place in December. And we will also update our supplemental around the same time in March. You can see where we are with our projections, and you can see some of the specific goals here, or items, I should say, that we fund and how they support those targeted subgroups. Two adjustments that were made from the slides that were posted is that our professional development for teachers, we will be spending that full adopted budget. We were able to increase that to cover more than 1.5 days of salary and benefits. And then another item that was adjusted from the adoption or the end of cycle last year was this secondary designated ELD, where we also identified the need for instructional assistance for SEDI classrooms. And those SEDI classrooms come with an increase of ELD students. So our ELD students get specific support in an ELD classroom, but they also get the additional support in other classrooms through the SEDI program and the instructional aides that help provide that. So those two are linked with an increase in that ELD population. And then here's another group of items that are under that goal 1 of instruction and college and career readiness. And you can see the different items here, the adopted budget and first interim update. As we go through these items, you'll see that some of them had an adopted budget of $0. And that's because they were have been part of our LCAP plan previously, but we were able to receive or new grant monies became available to fund those items. So we will use that grant money that's specific to that program before adopting a budget for those in the LCAP. So that's why you'll see those zeros. So it looks like Mr. Cantwell responded to Kelly in the chat, and then we have what are the other metrics that go along with the enrollment trends, student to teacher ratios, average classroom size by grade and subject, and secondary. What I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we will be sharing more information in the upcoming LCAP meetings where we can dig into each goal, talk about the metrics involved in measuring those goals, and our progress towards some of the objectives of that goal. But I'd open it up to Sharon or Peter too, to also respond to the average classroom size.
So in elementary, the average classroom size in TK through 3 is 24 students to 1. And then the average classroom size in grades 4 and 5 is 32 students to 1.
And in secondary, the average size is 30.5 per class, but that's really for the academic core classes, and the electives and PE classes and other classes like that can be significantly larger.
So now we're transitioning to goal 2, and these are the action items under goal 2. And again, tonight, the goal of tonight's meeting is to just give an overview of what's included in the LCAP and our entire district budget, but also give everyone an idea of the monies that have been earmarked to support these action items. So again, goal 2 is the whole child. It's the physical, emotional, and mental well-being of our students. And so in order to meet the goal, we have funded these items through our LCAP plan. Most of these are pretty consistent to previous years, and funding hasn't changed too much other than step and rank and salary.
And Robin, you may have said this, but just to reemphasize, we're in our second year of the 3-year LCAP. So as we get into planning for next school year, that'd be the 3rd year. So I just want to clarify.
And if you see in some of these areas where the first interim is lower than the adopted budget, typically that's because we have a vacancy, like unfilled position. So if we're able to fill that position, we will. It's just we have not had candidates to be able to fill that vacancy. And so that money has not been spent because of that unfilled position. And then an additional list under goal 2, the whole child, supporting their emotional, physical, and mental health. You see the items listed here at our sites. And again, the homeless transportation, there's other funding for that action item that is available. So we spend that because it's categorized just for that specific purpose.
And Robin, you mentioned that there could be unfilled positions and on paper a cost saving. So the LCAP supplemental dollars stay within the LCAP supplemental fund. And should there be any, let's say, salary increases or benefit increases or other cost increases, those carryover dollars will help to go ahead and offset those increases. But the money stays within LCAP supplemental.
And that'll be one of the things we discuss in our 4th meeting is how we would spend any carryover funds that were not spent because of vacancy or other related situation. And so goal 3 is the retainment and recruitment of quality employees. As you can see, our district and our board and goals have been focused on the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and supporting our staff in that effort. And so you can see some of those items here. These are some new items to our LCAP for the 22-23 school year, and adjusted from previous years. So you'll see that we have a consultant for that DEI work, PD that our teachers that were provided to our faculty, a DEI mental health consultant that's specific in doing work to support teachers and students as far as any triage or trauma and supporting students through that. And then our DEI lead stipends for teachers who are taking a lead in this work at their school sites, as well as money for those DEI lead teachers to collaborate or staff to collaborate and prepare for their site initiatives. Our last slide, as far as LCAP, is general fund expenditures. So these are included in the plan, even though they do not come out of the supplemental budget. And many of these address still goal 1, but they're listed in our LCAP because they're requirements that the county will look for. And we need to identify the funding or the funds that are spent on these items. Or they're also local items that were identified, but we cannot use supplemental funds to support. So those are the 2 reasons we have this list of items that are base funded. They do not come out of that supplemental budget, but they are included in our LCAP. So those are the slides that we wanted to go over tonight, as far as giving everyone an overview of the budget, an overview of the items included in our LCAP. These are resources for more information about our LCAP, about the California dashboard, which we'll talk more about in our subsequent meetings. The California Department of Education, as well as PTA information about the LCAP and LCFF. And so just circling back on the dashboard for a second, in our subsequent meetings, our next one will be our topic will be instructional services and our goals related to that. And so we will take time to talk about the dashboard and metrics as far as how we're measuring progress towards our goals and striving to increase or improve student performance and services. Our 3rd meeting of this year will be with educational services, and that's where we'll focus on goal 2, the whole child, and look at the metrics involved with our goals as far as supporting the whole student. And then our 4th meeting will be a recap and a revisit of our budget. At that time, we'll have our 2nd interim budget available, and we'll know or be able to predict if we believe there will be any carryover funds for next year. And at that time, we'll discuss and collaborate with our educational partners as far as any items that we would like to see included in next year's LCAP. I'm going to just go ahead and click on this link. And I think I'm going to have to switch my screen because I do want to show you where this information is located on our website, where you can view the actual LCAP plan. So while I do that, if there's any other questions from the chat that we can respond to, we'll take those or any other general questions. And again, I appreciate everyone posting to the chat so we can keep a documentation of the questions that were asked. So if you navigate to our website under district information, and can someone confirm with a nod that you can see the LCAP website? Okay. If you go to our district website, the local control and accountability plan, if you click on that, it'll take you to this site where we have our LCAP information for this year, the actual plan, budget overview. And then down here is our list of meetings. So after this meeting, I will be posting the recording if anyone would like to see those. And then our presentation is available here, our slides. Future meetings that are coming up, you can see those topics I had just described. And then we will also post the future meeting links here and slides about a week prior to each meeting. You can check back for that information. But we will still continue to send out an email blast prior to each meeting so that you can just check your email to receive that link and more information. Last thing too is you can see historically our LCAP information and some of those other COVID monies or grant monies that we have received in previous years and the plans involved with all of those. So if you do want to do a deep dive on LCAP, here's the place. So that's it for our presentation tonight. I can switch back if there's some contact information. If anyone needs that, you're welcome to contact any of us on this slide. So myself, Robin Anders, Coordinator of Instructional Technology, Dr. Peter Knappich, our Director of Elementary Ed, Ms. Sharon Caseo, Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services, and Mr. Andrew Cantwell, Assistant Superintendent of Administrative Services. I want to thank him for joining us tonight and presenting our overall budget, and as well as Dr. Knappich and Ms. Caseo. Any other questions we can ask? Otherwise, or excuse me, that we can answer. Otherwise, that's our presentation for this evening.
Were we going to go ahead and address any questions that were in the chat, or are we going to go ahead and include those as part of the presentations in educational service, instructional services, or because one of the questions is like on number 1 and number 2 of the actions, and are those the at-risk counselors? So back on goal 1.
Yeah, we can address those tonight.
Okay,
Yeah.
there it was. I think goal 2 maybe on.
That is correct. They are the counselors.
Yeah. It was on goal 2, I believe.
Yes.
There you go.
So our high school and middle school counselors support targeted subgroups. Yes. Another question is, how do you benchmark with other districts? If so, is there anyone having a balanced budget? If so, what are the main differences between their budget and Burbank's budget? And Mr. Cantwell, are you able to respond to that one?
Absolutely, we benchmark. I'm looking at other districts' budgets and salary schedules for compensation studies regularly. In fact, I've been on other districts' budget and human resources websites, about 10 districts to date I was looking at, and over the past 3 months, I've analyzed about 30 school districts. One of the key things that we are confronting in Burbank is declining enrollment. Think about for a moment, if you have 100 students and each of those students generate $10,000 roughly, that's what they do. If we lose 3 students, we have not had anywhere large enough an effect to be able to reduce class, overall staffing. We've not had an effect that's able to drive down any of our expenses. Nearly all of those costs are fixed, but we would lose $30,000 with those 3 kiddos. Now, to make the math simple, I use small numbers, but a very similar thing is taking place across the district at nearly every site. Well, not all sites, but at many sites and across many grade levels. And so where you have a 800 student kindergarten, that might be a 770 student kindergarten a year from now. We have a loss in revenue, but there's not an easy way to just close a single classroom because we lost 30 kids when they're spread out over 11 elementary schools. So it's complex challenges, but ones that we are confronting head on and working strategically to address.
Thank you. Another question, I see the ELD funds for English learners, but what COVID funds and actions have been taken or are planned to help dual immersion students get on track to their grade level in Spanish in elementary and secondary? I did want to just note that we do provide an action item here for funding towards the dual immersion teachers as part of their salary up to 39% based on the number of students that are in that dual enrollment program. Is that correct, Peter?
39% represents the percentage of English learners and or free reduced lunch unduplicated students. And then right below that, in action number 6, we also have our dual immersion instructional assistants. So we have 8 instructional assistants funded out of LCAP.
And as far as instructional support, Most of that is done currently by the teachers in the classroom, but we also have or offer and try to offer summer programs as well.
Mhm.
And then a question about pursuing additional funds from grants, increasing enrollment, to bolder actions like working with the California state governor to change the way funds are allocated, or city council tax and funding. So I know our superintendent's been very vocal about encouraging everyone to write their local representatives. A lot of times parent voices can be just as powerful, if not more powerful, than our district staff. But we do a lot of, when we have the opportunity, we do present our concerns and ask for additional funding where we think is appropriate. And Dr. Cantwell, or Mr. Cantwell, if you'd like to respond to that too.
Hey, Robin, certainly what you said is correct. I think that beyond that, Sharon has mentioned that we have 6 grants that are currently being managed out of the Instructional Services Department. We do seek additional funding, both from the kind of the traditional grant writing to the non-traditional. Our board has directed us to explore the feasibility of staff housing or alternative uses on some of our properties moving forward. That was something that just came out of a recent board meeting in conjunction with a facility master plan. And so I think across the board, we are trying to find ways to increase funding for the district. Just recently, a few years ago, we reduced the working hour requirement for those who live outside of Burbank to qualify for an interdistrict permit, an interdistrict transfer. That allowed us to, right now, about 10% of our student population is we're serving kiddos who live outside the district. And so that's another way, again, that we're trying to provide the most robust and richest program to all students we're serving through increasing enrollment.
Then I've seen another question about the dual immersion program and supporting students that are in that program after this year of distance learning. And I believe we have a dual immersion meeting this week. Is that correct, Peter or Sharon?
Tomorrow night at 6 o'clock for dual immersion families. Yeah.
So it'd be a great opportunity to learn more about what's going on in that program, or what the current data looks like, ask those questions. But I also want to encourage anybody that has specific questions about any of our programs to reach out to any of us. If we can't provide the answer, we'll definitely make sure someone here can.
And just to reinforce from board member Abby Punzer, Ken Carr, that we do have transitional kindergarten available to all students who turn 4 years of age between September 2nd and all the way through April 2nd. And then the April and May babies, we're going to place them on a wait list because we don't know if we're going to have any seats available per state law. And should we have seats available, then we'll start with the April 3rd babies, April 4th babies, April 5th babies, and start to go ahead and enroll them. So we were able to take all of our children last year that fell into April and May. So with if things go as planned, we'll be able to, but I don't want to make any promises at this point. So, but that's the plan.
So I see we're at the end of, well, no, we have, is the public hearing for boundaries coming up? Is it going to affect budgets and funds? Mr. Cantwell, I know you were thinking about that topic earlier today, if you want to share a little bit.
Well, I'm going to make an assumption that the question is regarding the transition that the school board is undertaking to transition to elections by district. If that's correct, then yes, Robin and I were talking about having that be a potential topic at a later LCAP meeting. But we will also be encouraging all of the community to attend our upcoming board meeting on February 16th. There will be a public hearing to discuss this transition. And then in early March, we will actually release a series of proposed or possible options for the way those districts could be drawn, and really desire community feedback at that time. We actually will have a few tools on our website that allow the community to create their own boundaries and to submit that to our demographer and to the board for consideration. So I appreciate the question and encourage you to all tune in over the next 2 months. We will be very actively seeking community involvement, community input in this process.
And Mr. Cantwell, the second half of that question was if it would impact any of our budgets or funding, and I don't believe it will, but could you answer that?
That's correct. So we are not looking at a change in boundaries of the district. We'll continue to serve the same geographic region and population we've been serving. This change is we currently elect our school board. If you reside anywhere within the boundaries of Burbank Unified, this past election, you had the opportunity to elect 2 new board members. In the year 2020, you had the opportunity to elect 3 board members. This would change to having each individual citizen, each voting member of the community, having 1 board member they elect every 4 years. And so you'd have your representative from your area of town. The board, prior to the public hearing, there will be more explanation. And so again, we encourage attendance at the upcoming board meeting. We will have our attorney and demographer explain the process, and then we will engage, or we'll open the public hearing. So there will be more information at the upcoming board meeting. We also discussed it on December 16th and at our January board meeting, I believe January 18th or so, mid-January. Those 2 board meetings, we also discussed this if you'd like to go back and watch the video to learn more.
So again, I'd like to encourage everyone to also participate in our February 22nd meeting. It's our next meeting for regarding instructional services. And then our final meeting, the March 29th, is when we'll do that LCAP budget update and discuss carryover. That'd be the best opportunity to bring forward any items that you would like considered for the LCAP. There was another question, I think, follow up of the public hearing to give public an opportunity to ask questions. Will there be opportunities for that, Mr. Cantwell?
Absolutely. So again, we will be holding multiple meetings, both board meetings and also outside of the board meeting, for the opportunity for asking questions and providing feedback.
Oh, thanks for posting the dual immersion parent meeting information.
You got it. I can't get my camera to work, but I am here.
So we're right at 7. We got exactly an hour. I think that's perfect timing for everyone to either get home and see their families or get some food and enjoy the rest of the evening. Please do reach out to us if you have any questions, and we hope to see you at our next LCAP meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.